So guys and gals, Billy's going to do his talk. We have shut down the registration area. We're going to try to go ahead and get it packed now. Why, thank you, Adrian.
I will cut you.
We've closed off registration in the lounge area. We're cleaning our stuff out of it. CP is going to be going back in a little bit later on tonight at 9 o'clock and prepping everything for his party. So keep in mind that's going to take place right after Billy's talk in an hour and a half from now.
If you're lucky.
We'll have the closing remarks and everything, so hang around for that. We're going to have some food. We're going to go hit Malone's later on. So without any further ado, Billy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Skydog. Everyone, please give a round of applause for Skydog here in this great conference. Well, another year and I'm still here, huh? Sucks for you. No, so hi, I'm Billy. I've been talking here for quite a while, and hopefully one day I will stop and save you all. About a little over a year ago, I left doing security. Actually, thank you, Rob. Thanks. Rob used to work with me and knows my love of Billy compliant drinks. If it's pink with a sugar rim, I want it in my mouth place. Al, just hold it. Cheers.
No, I just kernel panicked. I don't think you understand.
All right, so about a year ago, I actually left doing security. And when I left, a lot of people, their first response to me was, "Are you fucking crazy? Like, what are you going to do?" And well, everybody's got to, eventually go out to pasture, I suppose. But I didn't really come here to talk about really what our new startup does. Basically, it is a web performance company, but it's not like the really lame type of web performance, like load testing. Basically, when I worked in the security space, I managed a research team that built products that basically would scan your website and find security issues. And the company I work at now builds software which scans your website and finds performance issues. And so it's pretty cool. I would love to talk to anybody here who's got websites or web apps and wants to make them faster. But that's not really what I want to talk to you about. What I want to talk to you about is everything I've learned in the last year of starting a startup. Because when I got out of college at Georgia Tech, I went to work for a startup here in Atlanta, Spy Dynamics, and it ruined me. Because it was an amazing experience, and I will never want to work for a large corporation. I will gladly sell Zoomph to a large corporation, stay the requisite 2 years, and then leave, but I don't think I could ever work for a large corporation again. And the thing is, it has never been cheaper to start a startup, especially a technology startup, software specifically, hardware less so. When you think about just how, imagine you were trying to start a business at the turn of the 20th century as opposed to the 21st century, right? Like how did you go and get, you had to either, they didn't even have business loans at banks. It was your rich uncle. The amount of labor you would need, the type of equipment, facilities, everything, ridiculous. Now online, it has never been cheaper to start a startup. Anybody who's interested, I highly suggest, you're not going to really learn too much valuable stuff here. Read anything that Paul Graham has written. Founders at Work is a great book. Really, all of that stuff will give you some really great advice. Really, I just want to tell you kind of what I've learned in the last year. And the thing that I've learned is that startups are very hard for hackers because a lot of the things that make you awesome as a hacker will make you horrible at starting a startup. I know because I was horrible at it, and I'm not even good at it now, but I learned a lot of things the hard way. And that's because hackers love technical things. You want to work on the technical aspects of stuff. You also want it to be elegant, right? It's like what Press Mike was just saying about Stucknecks, right? Not only was it a cool hack, it was a sexy hack. Because it was like chain of Ode to chain of Ode to chain of Ode. Who builds something that hacks everything from Windows 95 up to the present? That's just sexy and awesome. But how much time did that take? When you're doing a startup, you don't necessarily have time to make stuff that's technically elegant or sexy. If you do, it'll be 2 years down the road, you'll have burned through your funding, and competitors will have already come into your marketplace and won it, and you're screwed.
You're in business to make money, not software.
Exactly. And Al and I were having a great conversation out in the hall, and that when you start a business, you're in a business to make money. You incidentally make software. That's what makes you money. But that's not really, you don't have a software business. You have a business that makes software. Oh, did you? I need to drink some more of this. The other problem with hackers is that we want complete solutions. We want technically elegant, complete solutions that solve a problem completely. Or we want a series of small, shell scripts that can give us the complete solution. But again, you are not going to have time for a complete solution, and we'll really get into this. But these are all things that kind of make things difficult for you. Also, as a hacker, and I love this, and I was guilty of this even after moving from an individual contributor to kind of a manager of individual contributors, is I am my happiest when I can take 3 days and dig down into the guts of something and deep dive and figure out everything how it works. I even like to say I'm not really a security guy. I just like to figure out how stuff works. And in the process of figuring out how stuff works, I figure out the flaws in it. And that's just kind of a side benefit of having figured out how it works. When you're starting a startup and you're running a business, you don't have time. You have to think of breadth instead of depth. And so that's really difficult. Also, it's a lot of people think, it's like Field of Dreams, right? If I build it, they will come. No, they don't know you exist. They will never come, and you will die eating ramen noodles. So just because you built some technology that was awesome, that is not a business. That is technology. And so this makes it very difficult to shift gears from being kind of a hacky, tech, geeky guy to actually trying to run a startup. So axiom number one, the first thing you got to get through your brain if you want to start a startup is your time is the most valuable thing you have. There is nothing more important than how you spend your time. I cannot stress this enough. And so what are really good examples of this? You have to understand your time is money, and you need to actually put a dollar value on what your time is. So if you make 50 grand a year, you earn $25 an hour. You earn $2,000, there's 52 weeks in a year. You get 2 weeks vacation, so that's 50 weeks. You work 40-hour weeks, which, by the way, you will not work 40-hour weeks as a startup, but let's just use that to suppose.
Is that with Benny's?
Yes, yes.
That's fully loaded?
Oh, absolutely. Full benefits, everything. That's 50 grand a year is $25 an hour. 100 grand a year is $50 an hour. Now, I've left HP, and I have no problem telling folks this. When I left HP as a manager, I was making about $120 a year. So I was expecting $50 an hour. And consultants, when they bill out at about $100 to $300 an hour. Now, that's because you're not billing out 2,000 hours a year necessarily. So you need to start realizing that your time is money. Great example of this is if you have a task that takes you 1 hour a month, that costs you $600 a year to do that task. So if you could pay somebody to do it for you and it's less than $600, you need to do that. I don't care what the task is. I don't care how much you enjoy doing it. You just can't sustain it. You need to spend your time. Great example of this is server administration, email administration. We'll get into this later, but there are things that you'll want to do. Again, you want to get in the weeds. You want to get down in the guts and make it awesome. You just can't afford it, because you're wasting time that you could be billing clients or trying to build your business. So just think about that. Whenever you have something you need to work on, be like, how much is this costing me a year to do, and how much would it cost me to pay somebody else to do this? All right, so time management is a key here. Startups are all about breadth. In any particular day, I have mountains of all of these little but usually time-critical tasks. So, and this is a flaw of mine, I put off stuff I don't want to do. The problem is that when you're in a startup mode, you have all these little things. You're like, I'll do that at the end of the day. I'll do that after lunch. I'll just get that tomorrow morning first thing. You normally can't put this shit off. And so most of the time in my evenings, I'm up till I'll work till about 7, eat dinner. And then after dinner, it's here's all the shit I have to get done. It's stuff I don't. Mostly email, but it'll be things like filling out quotes, sending out, this and that. So it's all this crap you don't want to do, but you got to do it. And making that switch is difficult. The thing is that by focusing on breadth instead of depth, you make progress on all of them. Actually, a method I've been using probably the last 6 months that's very helpful is the egg timer method. I'm sure there's probably a better way of doing that. But in the morning, I make a list of all the stuff I got to get done that day, and then I set an egg timer. So it's like for 30 minutes, I'm going to work on Zoom finances. I'm going to update the forecasts on what sales prospects we have coming in, what were my expenses this month, all of that stuff. And after 30 minutes, when the little egg timer goes off, even if I'm not done with expenses, I pretty much get to the stopping point, spend a minute or two wrapping it up, and I go to the next task. Because it is so easy to fall down a rat's hole, right? Like who here, when you're writing software, working on a task, you look up and you're like, holy shit, it's 10 o'clock at night. How did that happen? You can't afford to do that as a startup because it's like, holy crap. Like, a great example is I'm working with a big travel website that's based in Australia. So if I don't get stuff to them by about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, it's not there for them when they get there. And also they're a day ahead. So if I'm like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. No, it's Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday. It's their Saturday. And they're not going to see it until, my Sunday, their Monday. And so you can't put shit off. And this, by having the egg timer method and just going 30 minutes on each thing, you're guaranteed to make progress on everything, which is important. The other thing is you need to prioritize what you work on. And the way I do it is you ask yourself questions like, will this task generate me more customers or leads? Will this task result in me selling more things? So, for example, yesterday, I had to send off a quote to a customer. I had to respond to like 4 or 5 people that had contacted me through Salesforce saying they filled out our form on our website saying they're interested in learning more about the product. I had to fix a couple bugs in the product, and I needed to do actually some security consulting. I did the security consulting last. Actually, I did the security consulting, and then I didn't even have time to get to fixing the bugs in the products.
Was the first thing you did hire a sales engineer?
If only I had the available cash to hire a sales engineer, that'd be nice. See, I've got to work out my time to balance that. So you got to prioritize because you absolutely cannot afford to go down a rat's hole because the money you have saved up goes really fast. That's the other thing about running a startup now. Because it's so cheap to run a startup, you don't have a lot of money. So cash flow, we'll talk about this later, cash flow is a big problem because let's say somebody owes me $2,000. If they decide to pay me on the 15th of the month instead of the 1st of the month, that could be a big deal because I don't have like 20 grand sitting in an account somewhere so that I can like absorb and expand with the float, right? Like you're running really lean. You don't have that type of ability. So you really need to prioritize and make sure that you're doing stuff that's going to give you the fuel to keep going. And they call this like your burn rate and stuff like that. But just continue to remember that the cost of your time. So again, outsource, delegate, and accept less than perfect. And all of these things are very difficult for a hacker to do. Because what does a hacker do? WordPress, that's a piece of shit. I'm going to write my own CMS. No, no. As someone who broke into web apps professionally, please tell me what CMS you're writing, and hopefully it's in PHP, and I will have a fucking field day with it. Don't do that. You don't have time for that. Accept less than perfect. Move on. Actually, our website got hacked. I thought that was pretty funny. Somebody popped us. I forgot to update our WordPress. And yeah, we got hacked, and I laughed, and I took a half a day, and I cleaned it up. But you know what? Half a day of cleaning up WordPress over a 14-month stretch was way cheaper than me evaluating 15 different CMSs and then deciding which one was the most secure and then making my own improvements and then managing it and all of that crap. You know what? In fact, what I probably could have done is just paid somebody and say, here's my backup, here's my theme, restore my WordPress site.
It's cheaper to convince customers that you should have forgiveness than to not.
Exactly. It's easier to ask forgiveness than, well, ask permission.
Cheaper.
Cheaper. Yes, cheaper here too. So just remember, outsource, delegate, accept less than perfect. So axiom number 2, other than time management, is that incorporation is protection. And incorporation means separation. So you need to incorporate if you are going to start a startup. And the reason you do this is because it creates a separate legal entity. Give you a great example. True story, know somebody who does, they run a small boutique security consulting shop, or rather they did, because they were doing a security assessment and they took down a bank website. Like nuked the account database. They had to go back and get the nightly backup. And those guys did not have an LLC, did not have anything. The bank sued the shit out of them for taking down their website for a 24-hour period. They looked bad to the customers. And because they did not have a legal entity, instead of suing Zumpf Incorporated, they sued Billy Hoffman. It wasn't me, it was them. Instead of suing generic pen testing company LLC, they sued pen tester man. They took his house, they took his pension, he's fucked. It's not funny, he's fucked.
Right.
He has his wages garnished for a long time, and they took him to the cleaners. And he should. This is why you incorporate. Incorporation creates a separate legal entity. Anything you can do as a legal entity within limits. There's, this.
In case of gross negligence, like loss of life, they can pierce the corporate veil and need director's office.
Yeah, they can, during gross negligence and things like that. It doesn't totally protect you, but basically anything that you can do, a corporation can do. And so they are suing the corporation for being negligent, not you. They garnish the corporation's assets. They tank the corporation. They don't touch you personally. They don't touch your family. They don't touch your life savings. They don't touch your house. So this is why you need to do it. The thing is this is not difficult. It sounds scary, but it's not. There are different types of corporations. There's a limited liability corporation. There are S corps. There are C corps. What type of corporation you should become depends on what you want to do. Most people who are offering services, things like that, can get by with an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. Outerz0ne as a software company, which hopes to grow, and a potential exit strategy is to get acquired. It actually made more sense for us to have a C corp. We talked to our advisors about it. Al, what?
No, you said that you want to be bought 5 times now.
Oh, I want to be bought 5 times. Buy us, yes.
Yeah.
No. We're not there yet. You can buy us once we have a lot more revenue and give us more money.
You're going to fool me.
Indeed. So talk to somebody, right? Here's the thing, is that if you have a accountant, or you can go and buy an hour of an accountant's time and just sit down and be like, here's what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think makes the most sense? And they're going to ask you some basic questions like, what's this business for? What do you project your annual revenues to be? What are exit strategies? Would you ever want to take on board members? Would you ever want to issue stock? I ended up paying a lawyer actually to do the incorporation fees and stuff like that. And I mean, you can file a lot of this stuff. I actually was able to incorporate through the Secretary of State's website. It cost me $100. Took about 15 minutes. And then I paid a lawyer to actually write up, because we actually took a very small friends and family round of funding. And so we actually had a lawyer write up kind of like our bylaws and things like that, and the promissory note. So it was a little more involved, but this is not expensive. You're going to have to get an EIN. An EIN is like the social security number for your business. So whenever, when you get a W-9, or excuse me, a W-2 at the end of the year, for doing your work, when your corporation is like doing work with the company, they're going to send you basically a similar tax document, but it's not to your social security number, it's to your corporation's EIN. Some states let you just use your federal EIN as like the state social security number. Georgia is not one of those. You have to go to the Georgia Department of Revenue and file for a number. Actually, TurboTax is a huge help for this, because it'll be like, oh, you're doing your taxes, enter an EIN. And you're like, what's an EIN? It's like, here's what it is. Click these forms and we'll register one for you. So this stuff isn't difficult. It'll take a little bit of time, but not so much time that you necessarily need to outsource it. But it's critical. I cannot overstate this enough, because otherwise you will be like my friend who, seriously, his life is fucked now. So that's my cautionary tale. Don't get fucked. All right. The other thing to remember, in addition to protecting yourself from legal liability and financial liability, is that you are not your company. So you need to have a separate identity. Your corporation should have an address and a telephone number, should have an email address, should have a website. If you have blogs or an instant message or a Twitter feed, right? So we have a Twitter feed at Outerz0ne. I don't use at Outerz0ne to talk about my thoughts on, border or laptop searches at the border and Fourth Amendment application. I don't use it to talk about, I really like Obama, but I don't like what he's doing with, IP law or net neutrality, right? It's not your soapbox. It's your corporation's soapbox. And you need to separate them. The other thing you have to remember is, regardless of whatever your political beliefs, there's probably 40% of the people out there who don't have that belief. So do you really want to alienate 40% of your customers? Don't use your corporation as your mouthpiece. Keep them separate, trust me. And yeah, don't use them for your personal rants. Finances. So here's the thing you quickly learn, is that people don't pay me. When I get a check, it's not to Billy Hoffman, it's to Outerz0ne. People pay the corporation pays you. So I have a, what you need to do right away is establish a business checking account. Now, you can do this at Wachovia or any bank. I did it at Wachovia. They're free. You need an EIN, because just like when you apply for, a new bank account, you use your social security number. You need, since it's a business checking account, you need your business's social security number, which is an EIN. This is going to give you corporate checks. It's going to give you a corporate debit card. So I have like a Outerz0ne debit card. And so whenever I need to do Outerz0ne expenses or stuff like that, I can use that. It's actually really great. So when I'm buying stuff from like Kinko's online, I can use it like a credit card. And you use this to pay your invoices and pay your contractors. The way people get screwed is that they blur this line. They start putting corporate money into their personal accounts, or they're like, let me just put a little bit of my personal money into the corporate account to try to float something. Keep these separate. Keep them very, very separate. This is a really easy way to start getting into trouble. So quotes, invoices, documents, these things are a lot easier than you think. So like, great example, early on, some customers like, okay, yeah, we think we'd like it. Send us a quote for 5 user licenses. And I'm like, okay, that'd be great, but do I just send you an email saying 5 users license is $7,000 or whatever it would be? No, there's like a formalized quote, and you say this offer is good for a 30-day period, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of a big thing, but there are free templates out there. You can just go Google somebody's, like business quote, software quote, whatever. I literally took one that we used at HP. Called up a sales friend or a guy of mine in sales. I'm like, show me what quote we used. And I literally copied and pasted the Zoom logo on top of it, edited out a couple of things that didn't make sense, and I just used that. The other great thing is, so other documents, like non-disclosure, stuff like that. I was dealing with a company, and they're like, yeah, what's your non-disclosure, mutual confidentiality agreement, whatever. I'm like, oh, no, we're flexible. We typically use whatever the client has. Because, fuck, I don't have a mutual non-disclosure agreement. So they're just like, okay, here's what we got. I'm like, great, thank you. Now I have that too. Boilerplate. Your lawyer's already vetted this, and you take a look at it and make sure it's not promising your firstborn child or anything, but you just kind of acquire this stuff. Or you can go online and find it. It's really a lot easier than you think. It sounds very intimidating, right? Like business checking account, EIN, incorporation, quotes, facts, all these documents and templates. No, it's actually pretty easy. You'll spend probably 2 days just acquiring all of this information, incorporating your company, setting up your business checking account, all of that stuff. It's not difficult.
Managing a company, not coding.
Yes, that's the other thing to point out, and we'll get to this. Your technology, I probably spent 1% of my time dealing with technology. Early on, it was quite a lot, but we're fairly established now, and so you will not spend a lot of your time in technology. You'll spend a lot of your time doing all this minutia. Tracking the money. Okay, again, this sounds silly, but it's critical. It doesn't matter what you do, but at any point in time, you should be able to answer these questions. How much money do I have right now? How much money have I invested? Either I personally put into this, like I wrote a check to bootstrap the company, or I took from other people. How much money has sales brought in? Not only in total over the life of the company, but in the last month. How much money is coming in? How much money have I burned on expenses that were capital expenses? Like I bought a server, and so arguably if the company died tomorrow, I have capital, basically. I have an asset that I could sell and recoup some of that cash and pay off investors. What are your monthly expenses? How much money do you burn a month right now? My monthly expense rate is like $32.75. And a significant portion of that is my mortgage. The rest of that is money that I pay to contractors and sub-consultants. There's like $100 and so, $150 a month for like paying rack space servers. And then, so that's actually a ridiculously low burn rate.
It's suspiciously cheap, actually.
And that's the thing, is that, think about that. So $3,200 a month, 12 months a year, that's not a lot of money to run a company. It really isn't. To start out, and that's like, if I made nothing, it would cost me, what, 50 grand to run it for a year?
Suspiciously cheap. In other words, you're not paying yourself?
I'm peddling, no, I'm not. I'm paying my mortgage. I'm not paying myself. Do you like that?
If your burn rate isn't high enough, investors get sketchy.
Oh, that's true too.
Suspiciously cheap.
Well, you want to make sure. Well, that's the thing. That's why it's got to be transparent. That's why you want to track it. You want to be able to say, like right now, I could show you. Well, it's on a TrueCrypt drive.
But due diligence costs me money.
But I could show you every single expense that Zoom's, every single amount of money I've ever spent, every single amount of money I've ever taken in, every single sale. And the key here is your runway. Your runway is how much money do I have on hand. Forget about sales that have not closed yet, because that is not money you have. That is money you might have if the sales fairies decide that you should have it. And as we talk about sales, you'll realize sales fairies are in fact very real. So it's what money do I have on hand? What is my monthly burn rate? And that's how long your runway is. So if you have 10 grand and you're burning 2 grand a month, you've got 5 months. And in 5 months, you have no money. So at month 4, you better start looking for a job. And you need to know that, right? And the thing is, when you're running a startup, you're really lean. So your runway is probably only a couple months out. Cash flow. We talked about this earlier. Cash flow is it's not so much like you could look at this and say, in the month of January, I sold $5,000 worth of software and I paid out $6,000 in contracts and expenses. Or maybe I earned $5,000 and I paid out $5,000. Okay, great. At January 31st, your net is 0. But when did that come in and when did that go out? Did you get 1,000 of that in the first week and then 4,000 of it in the last week? But then you had to spend all your expenses in the middle? Well, you're fucked because you were negative for a little while.
Right, and that means that you paid interest on the negative, which means that you're negative.
Yeah, you actually went farther into the hole.
Right.
So, and when you're a startup, you are really lean, right? Like you don't have a big float to be able to absorb that stuff. So use a spreadsheet. What I actually do is, so I've got 2 spreadsheets. I've got one that is kind of like, expenses and sales and stuff. And then I have stuff that actually is on like I break it down per month. And I'm like, when do I pay a bill and when is an invoice coming in? And like the first of every month, I sit down and I say, what money is coming in this month? What days is it coming in? What money is money leaving? And I make sure that I never have a temporary negative. The other value here to have is when you do work, or when somebody does work for you, so we had a web redesign, and we get an invoice from the design company. You normally get to pay those invoices in 30 days, sometimes 40 days, 60 days. When you're a startup, take advantage of that. It's like, I've got money right now to pay you, but I'm not going to write you that check. I'm going to just in case some shit hits the fan, I will wait 29 days, and then I will write you that check. Now, the funny thing is, on the opposite side, you hate it when people do that to you, because it fucks with your cash flow. But again, this is stuff you can do. Take advantage of the leniency and what's allowed basically by the invoice. Business insurance. Okay, this is key. This is more protection for you. And a lot of times it's required for consulting jobs. So we went into this large hosting provider and we're like, yes, we'd like to, we're going to, basically our software scans your website and finds issues. And they're like, okay, great. Well, for consultants that are coming in and doing any type of interaction with their production websites, you have to carry errors and omissions insurance. Errors and omissions insurance basically says that, okay, if I as a professional am grossly negligent and do something horrifically bad, and I take something down, that I have insurance to cover that. So they'll be like, you have to carry $1 million worth of errors and omissions insurance, which, okay, it's not bad. It costs you about $900 a month to carry that. And at the time, we're just like, that's not an expense we're going to be carrying. This mainly is in consulting anytime. I mean, obviously you're doing sales consulting or marketing consulting, and you're not actually touching their assets. You don't have to worry about this. If you're a security contractor, even if you guys, I guarantee you your firm has errors and omissions insurance. In fact, even if those guys, actually no, that wouldn't have saved them because you really can't.
D&O, Directors and Operators Insurance.
Oh, is that what?
Yeah, so E&O and then D&O.
I'm not familiar with D&O. Okay.
Is that they pierce the corporate veil in the event of gross negligence?
Right, but the chance of killing somebody is pretty small, right?
No,
like.
No. It could be like I'm on a nonprofit board, and we have D&O insurance.
Oh, okay.
Just in case, like, let's say we mistreated a member of our organization and basically violated the civil rights.
Okay. So see, right now we have, a very small number of employees, but it'd probably be nice for us to eventually carry that. But it's a good example, right? And this is kind of a funny story, and this is going to make me run longer. But when I first started at SPY, there was this Indian security researcher there named Tam May, and he got hired the same time I did, and we're sitting in with the HR gal, Allison, and she's explaining health insurance to us. And Tam May goes, okay, well, what happens if I don't get sick? She's like, what? Excuse me? He's like, when do I get my money back? And he's like, that's not how insurance works. You just pay. And he's like, I remember he got so pissed off. Some people was like, that is a ripoff. You mean I give you money and if nothing happens, I don't get it back? And it's like, well, if you got it back, it wouldn't really be insurance, right? They just pay out when shit happens and then they don't take anybody in. That's not really a sustainable business model.
That's a savings account.
Exactly, that's a savings account. So, yeah, so insurance is there to protect you for when crap happens. And you will want it so that you are not catastrophically wiped out. So business infrastructure. This is where the geeky, technical, hackery side can come back, flare up, and hurt you. Great example, hardware, software. PCs are cheap. Seriously, Moore's Law means there's no reason to buy a business grade. This is a $650 laptop from Best Buy. It means nothing. If I drop it on the floor, I'm out $650. But it's cheaper for me to do that than go spend $2,500 on an unbelievably awesome ThinkPad that I could run over with a freaking tank, right? Who cares? It's $700. You can get a desktop for under $400. We have a code system. Like we compile, we do nightly builds, all that stuff. It's running on a refurbished HP dual core, 4 gig desktop or whatever that we paid $300 for. That was refurbished. It was like $299, right? No shipping. I'm not going to go buy a giant, quad core, 8 core Outerz0ne. Fuck that. I don't care. I don't need to spend that money. And you as a startup, you don't need to spend that. Same thing. You don't need to go buy a 1U box. Anybody who tells you go buy a 1U server, punch them in the face. You don't. If you just started a startup and you've got 15 grand, right, and you're taking no salary and you don't really have a mortgage you've got to pay or something, 15 grand could last you a year.
User cheap, power's expensive.
What?
User cheap, power's expensive.
That's true. Power can be expensive. But so cloud servers, cheap. Like if you got 15 grand and you're starting a company, are you going to really take 15% of your starting budget and buy a hardware asset that's going to be obsolete? No. We just use a cloud service in the rack space. We pay about $100 a month, and we've got this beastly quad core, ridiculous amount of RAM. The disk space isn't that large, but that doesn't really matter. And the big thing is it postpones the initial capital costs. Yeah, after 2 years, will we have basically bought a 1U server? Yes. But I don't care because in 2 years, we're going to upgrade that and be on something faster. So it's all about trying. Remember we talked about cash flow and you don't have a lot of float? You want to get rid of spikes.
So have you amortized the cost of that server in every sale for 2 years?
That is a question for our accountant, which we will talk about accountants next. Automated backups. Here's the other thing, is that when you're small, again, automated backups are insurance, test your backups. There's this great company called Jungle Disk. It's actually based here in Atlanta. Rackspace bought them. I pay like $2 a month for a ridiculous, we're storing probably 30 gigs or something up in there. And like every night, it does differential backup for all of our systems. And it also, the really cool thing that I like about them is that all your backups are accessible through a mapped Windows drive. So you don't have to use some crazy, let me select what files, resync these stuff. You can just literally go to a mappable drive and copy a file. Oh, really? Nice. Okay. And I think actually you can do it either on Rackspace's stuff or on Amazon stuff. It's a great company. I highly suggest it. I love it. Email, great example. So, I could set up an Exchange server and set up a bunch of Evolution clients and set up Spam Assassin and all that stuff. Remember, 1 hour a month, a task that takes you 1 hour a month, that's $600 a year. Google Apps for your domain, $60 a year per user. $60 a year per user gets me a customized version of Gmail. So I have like a Zoomed version of Gmail, Calendar, Google Docs, and Sheets. We can do all our collaboration. Gives me offline access. It's like instead of like, what's Google Gmail at now? Like 8 gigs of space, something like that. We have 25 gigs of space. It's awesome. Calendaring is awesome, and it's all over SSL. And so, yeah, no, I don't totally have to stop worrying about spam and backups and mobile access. But you know what? I don't have to worry about, can I access my crazy Exchange server over my iPhone, right? It's Gmail, yes. The answer is yes.
So now you have to worry about the Chinese having access.
Apparently. Apparently. Well, maybe the Chinese will decide that Zoom is an amazing business opportunity and ask to buy us.
Oh, yeah, other people keep count too.
So, but this prime example of something that yes, you could do this yourself. And if you've invested the time and effort and set up like a centralized server and whatever, okay, great. Use what you've already got. But if you're going to do this from scratch, you would be stupid not to do this. I mean, seriously, remember, you would probably spend an hour a month just patching, right? Patching your mail server, patching your mail clients. Fuck it, Gmail, $60, you're done, and you don't need to worry about it, and you can get on with your life. Phone. Okay, great example. Going back to the whole separating the corporate from your entity, your corporation should ideally have its own telephone number so that you're not like, what's up, I'm drunk, when the Australians call you. They tend to like that, but, So Skype is a great example of this. Skype, you can get a telephone number. Actually, so using a separate cell makes a lot of sense. So we don't do this personally. We use Google Voice. We'll talk about that in a second. But I know a guy who started a company, and they just got a prepaid cell phone, and they just put minutes on it. And that way they know if it's ringing, it's a customer. And they just answer it with their business stuff. Yeah, Bo?
AT&T will give you a free 800 number if you have AT&T cell phone service.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. That's awesome, because we don't have an 800 number. Okay.
There's actually an app you can get for your iPhone. Plug AT&T. So it's called receptionist, and you can do all kinds of stuff with it, like send it to a live person and be like, oh, so-and-so's not here right now. Can I take a message?
Rob, I don't know where you got this, but it is excellent.
That's the girliest drink they had.
Nice. Y'all laugh, but you get some of the best drinks that way. All right, so Google Voice is freaking amazing. So Google Voice will give you a free telephone number. And the awesome thing, basically Google Voice is a number that you then in Google Voice tell it where you want it to forward. So we have a Google Voice number for Zoom, and between like 8 and 6 Atlanta time, it forwards to my cell phone. Now the thing is when I see it, it's not, let's say Strick calls my Google Voice number, I've got Strick as a contact. So I don't see Strick calling me. What appears on my caller ID is the Google Voice number. So I know this is a customer, answer it Zoom, not what's up, I'm drunk. So awesome. And the other cool thing is that it has voicemail. So you can be like between 8 and 6, don't ring anything, just go straight to voicemail, and you can record your own voicemail message. Now the only downside about this is that if it routes the number to your cell phone, but you don't pick up, it uses your cell phone's voicemail with the cell phone's voicemail message. So that can kind of be a problem if you're already on a business call. I'm sorry?
You can have your voicemail forwarded.
You can, but the problem is that basically Google Voice takes over your voicemail on your phone, and so you only have your Google voicemail phone. So people who would just be calling my number directly would get my Google Voice answering machine. Yes.
It depends on which device answers the voicemail first.
Exactly. You've got to manage it. But so it can be tricky, but a great alternative. I really kind of like this idea of just grabbing a cell phone. Because you don't ever have to call people on it, right? You can just call from your cell phone, be like, oh, I'm calling you from my cell. But it's a great way of, because it's prepay, and if you don't use it, it doesn't die. And if it's ringing, you know it's a business account. And prepay cell phones, to facilitate drug trafficking are nice and cheap. So phone continued. So conference calls. You're going to need to do conference calls when you get started. Freeconference.com. Like, I know a bunch of people. Actually, so the wife of the guy who was the VP of development at the company I was at, anyway, so her PR firm who we use, they use freeconference.com. Like, so I bumped into a bunch of small businesses that use this. Basically, you get a long distance access number. If you want, you can get an 800 number, which will also offer recording and personalized greetings and crap like that. And it's not 10 cents a minute, it's cheaper than that. But I just use it's a long distance number that you dial into. Fax, I have never in 14 months needed to use a fax machine. Never. Most people, if they have a document, they can just email it to you. You can print it, sign it, scan it, send it back. Kind of a pain in the ass, but there's no need for that. So it's really easy in terms of infrastructure. You don't need a lot. Video conferencing, sometimes you need this. The thing it's most useful for are demos. Skype works well for this. You can go ahead and share your desktop, but that only works really if you're calling a single person or there's a bunch of people in a conference room. We used to use GoToMeeting. It was $30 a month, and you could do unlimited meetings with unlimited participants, but Zoom's product is web-based SaaS. So a lot of times we just said, hey, here's a demo account, log into our product. And we'll walk you through it. And because we could see what they were doing on the server side, we actually ended up not needing video conferencing. TinyChat.com is pretty awesome. It's great you can basically create on-the-fly chat rooms with webcams, and it just uses Flash. So there's not like that installing, GoToMeeting or, downloading some crazy ActiveX control or a Java applet, God forbid, or, some Adobe something or other. Yeah, Adobe has their live meeting. It's none of that crazy crap. It's you go there, start broadcasting. It's great.
TeamViewer.com is great for shared desktop.
Which one is that? TeamViewer.com? I hadn't heard that. Okay, cool.
Not free for corporate use.
Not free for corporate use? Okay.
Not free.
Thank you for being honest.
So,
you don't want your corporation to go out of business when it gets sued.
That's right. So your website, again, you really would be stupid to do this yourself. Like you can host, so we have basically our product runs in the Rackspace cloud, it scans and people log into our site, but there's customer data on that. So we don't actually run our corporate website on that same system. I mean, we could, but we're paying like, actually basic hosting is less than that a month. Like you can get hosting for like $3 a month. And they'll give you a hosted WordPress installation. There are lots of themes, lots of plugins. Actually, it's kind of cool because a lot of the performance problems we find on websites, there are WordPress plugins that will solve them for you. So it's kind of cool because it's, we can help people quickly speed up their sites based on the CMS they're using. But don't run your own website. Don't try to keep up with patching Apache, which that sounds kind of cool. Don't try to do it. I mean, if you have system administrator experience and you like doing that stuff and you're already having to do it because your product demands you do it, okay, that's fine. But
delegation equals indemnity. It's like,
yeah, yeah, that's somebody. That was those HostGator's problem, not mine.
Let's turn around and sue them too.
So, well, first of all, let me just say, like, as funny as that was being, if you ever get in a problem with, oh, well, we'll just sue them too, you're already fucked. You've lost. If you've brought lawyers into this, you've already lost. So that's not really a viable, like, strategy. Like, you want to avoid the lawyers ever having to be involved, not, we have a plausible strategy for when the lawyers get involved. So don't try to do this yourself. Seriously, don't. It can be a huge pain in the butt. And again, remember, if you spend an hour a month, $600 a year. So just pay somebody to do it. Messaging. So this is key. I cannot get this across enough. Never until I got to HP did I ever hear messaging being used as a verb. Like, we need to message this correctly. And it kind of pissed me off. But messaging is all about succinctly expressing what it is you do and understanding how you should express that so that it most successfully appeals to your customers.
Should I ask for your elevator pitch right now?
You could. Zumpf builds software to help website owners find and fix performance problems that are slowing down their website.
So it's basically the shortest way to bullshit your consumer base.
No, because it's not. It's more than the elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is I just stepped into the elevator with Mark Horowitz or Mark Andreessen, or Ben Horowitz from Andreessen Horowitz, and I want to. I've got 2 floors to get them to like me. Pretty please. Do you like me? Yes, no. Circle here.
So it's your value statement and then go into detail.
Exactly. So what problems do you solve? Right. What are the alternatives? And why are you better? So, okay, yeah, there's this problem and you solve it. Do I care about this product? First of all, you should answer these questions before you decide to start a startup, right? Because you got to know whether it makes sense for you to do this. So when I was doing website security, I found it was like, holy crap, you are hacked to hell and gone. But not only that, like, this website's just really crappy. Like, it's fundamentally broken. Some of these, like, your CSS files are returning 500, so your site isn't even rendering properly. I found one site, actually, I'll tell you this, HP.com right now, in some of their style sheets, have unexecuted either ASP or JSP code. I can't tell because it's just using a little, less than sign percent, and then like equals some, variable name. So they have
Insurance as a CEO to give out loans.
Of course, I don't care. They're not exploitable. So it's, but a great example of it's just a misconfigured website, right? It's not even working properly. And so I found all these performance problems with it too. And so I'm like, well, wait a minute. These performance problems are over the place. So I know these problems exist. Why aren't they being solved? Is it because they know about them but don't care? Or is it because they don't know about them? Or is it because the cost isn't that big of a deal? So I had to go find these things out. So you should answer these questions long before you start the startup because this basically determines whether it makes sense. Is there a need? Yeah?
What do you usually find out through your research? Do they not know? Do they not care?
It depends on the problem. So in the web performance space, it is a problem. They did not realize that they did not know they had the problems. They're like, wait, what? It's not what? Seriously? And then we'd be like, your web server is not configured with compression. You're loading 18 JavaScript files, and your page takes 22 seconds to load. And by making these changes, your page will load in 7 seconds. And they're like, wait, what now? You can make our site load more than twice as fast? We're like, yeah. And they're like, and who do I write the check to? And I'm like, you write it to Zumpf because you don't pay me. You pay the corporation, and the corporation pays me.
Because because it's not a
more than twice as fast.
it's not an easy it's not a problem that you understand that you have until someone explains it to you.
Exactly.
But there's a very technical solution that needs to be implemented more than.
The challenge here is that you can get into what's called missionary sales. And don't go to a dirty place with that. It means that you have to go and convert the heathens. Basically, you're having to explain, look, like, what is front-end performance optimization? I already do load testing. Why do I need to do what you do? And you explain, no, here's what the problem is. Here's the things you already have. Here's why they don't solve that problem. Here's what that problem is costing you. And here's how we fix that problem better than anybody else who can fix that problem. But it's not just about having answers to these. Who do you appeal to? Is somebody in IT operations going to buy your solution? Or is somebody in the QA market going to buy your solution? Or somebody in the dev department going to buy your solution? That's going to change how you communicate with them, right? Like, what is important to them? So if you're selling to the developer community, your point is that you want to make it faster for them to write code.
Now, there's three decision makers. Who's the investor?
Yeah, we'll talk about this in sales, but you have user buyers, economic buyers, and basically compliance buyers, people who have to check marks. That's fairly advanced, but understand messaging. Now, the thing is that I thought I was pretty succinct about this. We did a huge website redesign in November. We actually paid somebody to come in and write the copy for the website. I'm like, I can do this. Tracy, my friend who's helping me with this, she's like, no, you can't. You can get up at conferences and drink girly drinks and talk for a long period of time, but you can't write for shit. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Good to know.
Hire her.
I have. That's why. So basically, I paid somebody to come in, and he interviewed me for probably 2 days. Like, tell me about what your product does. Why? He asked all of these questions, right? Like, explain to me. And we basically narrowed it down to, what are like the 3 things that would really resonate with your target market? Are you going to make their job easier? Why are you going to make their job easier? If you're selling into the QA space, do you let them test the holistic application faster? You give them the coverage they need. So it's understanding who your audience is, what their pain points are, how do you speak to the language. This can be difficult, and getting it right is crucial because you want it to be sexy. Rob was telling me, like, our old website looked like crap, and then he's like, wow, I looked at your new website, and it's like very clean and professional looking. And that professionalism is what you want to convey. And so getting your messaging down is key. You can do it yourself, but just when you're crafting it, you need to have answers to these questions. So what's wrong with this logo? We're talking about logo. Oh, yes, it's a turtle. But it's a turtle going fast. He's got little goggles, and he's smiling, right?
It doesn't tell me about your company.
True, it doesn't. I'm sorry? You don't like the logo. There's a lot of things wrong with this. So think about the Nike swoosh. Think about... It's a flaming turtle, yes. So think about the Nike swoosh. Think about like the PepsiCo logo, or even something like the Wildlife Fund, which is just the panda. They're fairly simple. They're easily recognizable.
Too much data in your logo.
This is too complex. Right. So if you're trying to print this, think about printing this on a T-shirt, no problem. Printing this on a pen, that's going to blur together. You're not going to be able to see stuff.
That a turtle is fast, though?
Yeah, these two turtles are together. This is busy. It has...
I don't care.
Al, I will beat you in the face. It's got, 2 different types of greens, and you can't really see what this is, right? And it's got a name and this. So it's a busy logo. How is it? You don't want to make them too complex. Think about size. Will it look big? Will it look small? Think about colors, right? If this is black and white, will you still be able to tell what it is? What about white on black? There's what's called 4-color printing, where it's not actually you only get 4 colors. It means they do mixes of the 4 colors. So you basically get, like what a photo or like a JPEG would be. But understand it. So the logo we came up with was this. And the reason we did is because it was easy to convey. Like, we've got a bunch of black polos with a white logo.
You hire a VC?
We actually went out to, I'm going to talk about it. So getting logos, outsource this. Yeah. Don't do it yourself. There's a great website. They're crowdspring.com, 99 Designs. Basically, you go on there and artists bid. You say, I'm a tech company, and we want something that conveys these themes. Here's a little bit about us. And they just submit you designs. And what you do when you submit your bid is you're like, I will pay the winning guy $400. And the site takes like 10% of that. So the winning bid gets whatever. And so for a 2-week period, we got like 100 and 90 submissions for logos, and you'd go in, you'd be like, okay, I like this, but could you rotate this 45 degrees, or like change it this or that, or I like this, but could I see it in blues? And so you're giving feedback, people will give you additional designs, and then new people will see that, and you just iteratively get better designs.
Yeah, brand consulting is expensive because of user experience, but if you can crowdsource that, you wish away the cost.
Yeah, and this cost, so you can do everything from logos to full web designs. Our logo cost us about $400. We could have done more. The website said, look, on average, if you bid below $300, you receive on average like 50 or 60 submissions. If you bid above this, you get roughly this many submissions. And so I said, you know what, I'll pay a little bit more. I don't care.
Did you come up with the name?
Actually, no, Tracy came up with the name. My friend Tracy. Zoom. It's like going Zoom, but then you get punched in the stomach.
I like
Boom.
that. Is
Yeah.
she single?
No, she is not. She is awesome.
Do I know why?
I don't think I want to know why you want to know that she's single. My ears will burn. All right, business cards, right? Business cards worth your weight in gold. Carry them with you always. That little fifth pocket in your jean, perfect for business cards. Put them in there. The other thing is don't ever make these yourself, right? Nothing screams amateur like an inkjet printed business card. Seriously, I've had people give these to me, and it's like, what?
All right.
What's that line from the Family Guy where they're like, we accept Discovery? He's like, I refuse to accept your subpar credit card, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, your fly-by-night credit card payment system, and threw it out. So, yeah, like nothing says amateur like an inkjet. Go ahead, spend the money, get something with a heavier card stock. I'm a big fan of moo.com. They make full-size business cards or these kind of like smaller ones that I like. So it's like Zoom, and then on the back it's like, how fast can your website be? It's those 4-color printing, which means you basically give them an EPS file or an Adobe Illustrator file. Oh, that's the other cool thing. When they design your logo, you don't just get like a JPEG, right? You don't want a JPEG or a PNG because those things don't scale. You want vector-based outputs.
Is more important than the business card.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, what you do with it, but this is kind of cool.
It's call them.
That's very true. You definitely need to follow up, but you want to have these things there, and you want to basically make an impression, and you want it to look professional. And always carry these around, because think about it. You spend a couple $100 and you get 1,000 of these things. And I put them in every single backpack that I have. I put them in my suit bag, which I never take because I never wear suits. I put them in my car. I put them in my wallet. I basically put them so if I ever meet somebody and they're like, oh, what you do is cool, give me a card, I will have a card somewhere. Right? Like I even put some in my wife. I'm going to say this, she's going to punch me, but I went to the bag that she puts her tampons in her purse, and I put them in there. I did. I totally did.
I like when you say, I put them in my wife.
No.
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 And then you fold it up in her tampon case.
I did. Because because she's going to have the purse, she's probably going to have that. So, seriously, have them everywhere, and I literally mean everywhere.
He totally put his business in his wife.
That's right, I did. All right, axiom number 3. Only your customers can tell you what you want. Rob's going to start laughing here, but when you work for a company and product management is like, I know what they want. And you're like, did you talk to customers? And they're like, shut up, that's not your concern. It's like, you're just making shit up, aren't you, right? Like you have no idea what they want. Only your customers can tell you what you want. You need to build for what they need. So you want to get whatever it is you're building in front of a customer ASAP. This is what's called a minimally viable product. You'll see MVP, this title used a lot with startups.
Hang on a second. Before you do this, product management can't do their job until you, the CEO, tell them who the customers are.
Sure, of course. That gets back to the who your audience is, who are you selling this
You are
to.
Babe Ruth. You've got to pick the star that we're hitting at, and then we'll give that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't fault them if you didn't give them direction, right? But at the same time, it's not what they think the product should be. It's not what I like. Maybe you and I can argue about whose opinion matters more, and maybe yours matters a little more than mine, and maybe my experience matters a little more than you. When I was at HP, we had these conversations all the time. And then when I was like, fuck it, I'm leaving, I didn't care. And I literally in me was like, fuck your opinion, fuck my opinion. What matters is the customer's opinion. And nobody's talking to the customer. So you need to talk to the customer. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. So that's the thing. Get their feedback and actually track the feedback. So this was the other thing, is that I worked as a research manager, and so product management would come to me and say, we need to focus on these things. I'd be like, who wants those? So that as I build them, I can talk to them and make sure I'm building what they want. And he's like, I can't tell you that. That is the worst answer you should ever hear, because anybody who is ever building anything needs to have a spreadsheet. And that lists every single feedback they've gotten from a customer. Basically, all right, these 3 customers want this feature. Because you should be able to go to that and be like, you know what? Those 3 customers want that. Those 3 customers represent 40% of my sales. I'm going to make them happy, and I'm going to rank that above doing this feature that these 7 guys want, because those 7 guys pay me $100 a month, which is nothing. Whereas these guys pay me $1,000 a month. You need to be able to answer those decisions. Again, this sounds very simple, and it's not difficult to do, but it's one of those things like having to maintain that. You get an email, you go and update. So you all start to see those little tasks that I was telling you about that are time critical, that you have to do, that you don't really want to do, but are absolutely critical for you to run your business. Because think of it like you are gathering data from a bunch of sensors. And if you are not gathering that data, you can't act appropriately because you don't know what the hell's going on. Do you have another question? There are probably commercial tools. I just use a spreadsheet. I mean, we don't have a lot of customers. And actually, what we do use is uservoice.com. This is awesome. So basically, there's a little widget. I don't think I have internet access, or I'd show you. But have you all ever seen like the little red feedback that says, a tab that says feedback on the side of a website or a product? We're a web-based SaaS, so that anytime somebody can be like, hey, this page is confusing, feedback, I don't understand what this means, or what, why isn't there an export for XML here? Why is it only text or CSV? And instantly it'll track it. And the cool thing is other people can vote and say, yes, I like that too. And because it's coming from Zumpf, we actually can tie, based on their username, who ordered it. So we do kind of have some software there, but ultimately I basically get an email whenever somebody does that, and then I just put the email into the Excel spreadsheet.
So product management for customers, product management for markets.
Yeah, exactly. You want to go ahead and make sure you understand what is out there. Now, the other thing is everyone, you can't be a slave to this, right? There's a famous quote that said, if Henry Ford listened to his customers, he would have been selling buggy whips instead of cars. And because sometimes people don't know what they want. Apple has this problem all the time. If they had followed what customers wanted with a tablet, they would have made a piece of shit like everything you all have thought of tablets for the last 8 years, right? You would have, with some crazy stylus thing and a really crappy version of XP.
It's called Windows.
Yes. So, there's the thing, is that you can't always listen to them, but when you're starting out and you're really kind of exploring this market, like you are no Steve Jobs. I'm not Steve Jobs. None of us are Steve Jobs yet. You can get there, but
Steve Jobs is Steve Jobs.
You really do need to get this in front of customers, get their feedback, iterate, and that's the other great thing, iterate as quickly as possible. The great thing about being a SaaS is that we find a bug and we fix it that after. Like I have found and fixed a bug in a 15-minute time period for a customer during an eval, which is awesome. The other thing is you want to lower the barriers of entry for people to touch your product. Al, I'm not going to get through this if you keep interrupting me. I want to do this, but just let me get through this. So you want to lower the barriers of entry of people touching this as quickly as possible. I know you want to say something dirty about the touching. So we have tiered pricing at like $99 a month, $200 a month per. It's basically per user per month.
It was a good question. It's like if they paid for that, then okay. But if they didn't, then fuck off.
Well, yeah. Also, that's the other thing is don't give ridiculously amazing features to people who aren't giving you a lot of money.
Right.
So we have a very large social networking site that's reviewing some of our stuff, and they're like, okay, that's interesting, but we'd want X, Y, and Z, and we're like, we'd be happy to build that to you. Write us a check. Right. The answer to that when you're a startup, more money in my mouth. The answer to all their questions when you're small is, we can do that. Because you don't have the inefficiencies of a big organization that's like, oh, well, we need to have a scrum meeting about that and bring in these guys and talk about this. No, fuck that. It's like you're drinking at night with the 2 guys you work with and you're like, hey, I think we should do this because they want to. Okay, sure, why not?
Who cares? Your money's money is money that's money.
I don't even know what that means, but that sounded awesome. So you want to lower the barriers of entry to people using your product. So free trials. So if you go to Zumpf.com right now, /free, there's like a button to actually get to it. You can get a free scan of your website. We've done 12,000 of these in the last 9 months. So that's 12,000 people that have used our product. which is pretty awesome, and it sounds really impressive when you talk to venture capitalists.
But that's fucked up because you're using them to mine data to make your product better.
Oh, sure, yeah, I'm totally like getting something out of it, right? Like, I'm not just a whore giving it away, right? Like, I'm getting a little bit of pleasure out of it.
If you weren't, I would punch you in the neck.
Well, that would be bad. But also, so lower the barriers of entry of getting this into the hands of the product, because you want to get that feedback as rapidly as possible. All right, axiom number 4, and this is actually kind of funny. You can always fix everything later. Action, even poorly done action, is better than wait and see, because you don't have time to wait and see. And a perfect example is this slide used to, when I gave this talk at ShoeCon, said, you can always fix everything later. And so sure enough, yes, I was able to fix it later. And so now it's awesome. So seriously, this gets back to that, don't worry. So some cases, like a customer's like, we need this feature. And I'm like, okay, shit, I don't want to write that. Oh, look, there's image magic. Awesome. And I literally, in our code, I've written code to basically shell out to image magic, do something, capture the result that come back, and use it. And of course, I mean, following open source licenses, we put, this product consumes or uses, we'll put the copyright the copyright statement and everything.
Right the first time, but you have time to do it over and over.
Right. You can always, and this doesn't apply just to technology. Great example. So when we started the company, I actually created an S Corp instead of a C Corp. The reason we decided to end up doing a C Corp is it's a little easier once you start getting rounds of venture capital to do stuff. And so it's like, oh, I created an S Corp, blah, blah, oh crap, what do I do? I now have this legal entity and it's the wrong thing. No problem, lawyers can solve everything. It was like, bing, done. Fixed it later, 6 months down the road. We took friends and family around, we were able to change stuff. So you can always fix it later. If you try to say, shit, I need to make this perfect. No, you don't have time. Get it in front of customers. Get people using it. Validate that somebody wants to pay you money to have this thing, and move on. Pricing. All right, I cannot stress this enough. Pricing, you will almost always underprice your products. Because, I looked at this and I'm like, has anybody here ever worked on enterprise software or sold enterprise software or built it? Right? So I worked on a security product that we sold entry, even with discount, it was like $28,000 per user per year. $28,000 is a ridiculous amount of money, right? That's absurd to me. Until you buy a house and then you realize it's actually not that much. But, I mean, when you think about software, you're like when you're writing it, you're like, someone would pay me $28,000 a year for this thing? There's a big jump between what people will be expecting to pay for WinZip and what people pay for enterprise software. The key to do this is that understand what are you replacing. So the cool thing we do with Zoomph is we've automated a lot of shit that you can do manually. So we're freeing up time and you have to buy. Are you freeing up someone's time so they can be more efficient? We build Zoomph as an efficiency tool. We're reducing the amount of time your guys need to test it, and we're making your website faster and more efficient. So it can support, right now your existing configuration can support 100,000 simultaneous users. You use Zoomph, you can support 120,000 users without making additional capital investments. Companies like, well, shit, I would have had to spend 30 grand on new servers and load balancers. Yes, no problem, sold. So that's the thing, is you need to understand what's your appeal. The other thing to remember is the approval process. So sometimes there are going to be certain gateways where it's like, if you're not at least a certain amount, they're going to think, oh, you're not enterprisey enough. Enterprise is the most bullshit made up word ever. I will flat tell you. Enterprise means I added $15K to the price. That's what enterprise means. I shit you not. We have enterprise pricing. And you'll actually note on the Zoomph site that says enterprise custom call for quote. Because that way we can kind of adjust it to meet your unique needs. We can meet their unique needs. Yeah.
This is not about your pricing or your product, but what does your life experience bring to your company that isn't being fulfilled by other people? Not that your product's not good, but you say that you suck at this and you're just learning this, but what has your life experience brought to your company that makes your company more valuable than everybody else?
The biggest thing is that, it's really hard to say this without sounding like an asshole, but I think I know websites really, really well. And so I bring a lot of expertise into how websites work, how to interact, and how to make them faster. And so even though I suck at starting a startup, I'm good at making software that analyzes websites. And that's also really good. So here's the other thing. How many of you have ever are in IT or ever bought a security product like a firewall, right? Well, no, not a lot. So if you're in purchasing or whatever at a corporation, you might buy firewalls once. You might decide who your firewall vendor is once. Twice if the first guy fucked it up. Right? You don't go and buy, it's not like the seasonal, it's not like, oh, let me go read Vogue and find out which firewall is in season this year, right? You just have a firewall. And so when you're starting a company, you're really making a relationship with someone. And so you're not it's not like I'm selling you WinZip and you're like, does it do feature X, Y, and Z? And if the answer is no, I don't want to buy you. A lot of it is who you're buying it from. Hey guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to go quick, but it's hard for me to concentrate with all the noise. So you need to remember that you are selling, in a lot of ways, yourself as well. Because they're not buying product 1.0. They're buying product 1.0 through 8.0. They know it's going to get better, and they know it doesn't do all of the things they want it to do now. And so you just need to remember to kind of include that, you're getting us and our knowledge and our kind of where we're going. You're investing in us, not you're buying a software product that you'll use once. So sales, and we're actually getting near the end. So sales is way more complex than you think. I cannot even begin to tell you how to do this. The thing is that you need to understand who your ideal customer is. So our ideal customer is large companies that have either a large number of web properties that change a lot, or they have a small number of web properties and they get a lot of their revenue directly from their websites. So Amazon's. CNN, because they get revenue from advertising. So basically large firms that their web presence are important to them. You need to know who that is. You need to understand how budgets work. There isn't a giant pot of money that everybody in the company says, I need to go buy something. Let me go get some money. IT operations has money. Dev has money. They get their money allocated when their fiscal year starts, and they probably already have certain things allocated. So if you come to them in the middle of the third quarter and you want to sell them, 50 grand worth of stuff, they may love you. They may think you are the greatest thing ever, right? They can't buy from you. They don't have the money. They want to, and they'll say, talk to me in 6 months. But you're fucked. And so you're not fucked, but you've got a prospect, and you've got something that'll maybe happen down the line. But you need to understand how this works. And so you can identify, and again, this comes back to time management. You need to quickly identify, is it worth my time to pursue talking to this person? We've had some, that sounds harsh, but we've had some very large companies come and talk to us that are very bureaucratic. And so it's like they've got, understand the approval process. It's like, hey, I'm a developer and I manage a team of 3 developers and we want this. But I don't have fiduciary power. I can't write you a check. I have to get this guy to approve it. But because we're in a budgetary freeze, this other people needs to approve it. And 10 people get involved with buying the software. And it's like, look, maybe I could sell you, 5 grand or 10 grand worth of software, but it's going to take me 3 months to do it and probably about 15 meetings and conference calls and everything, and I'm just not going to do that right now because I've got these other 5 people that are small that are a lot easier for me to work with. Now, that's simply just because we're small. We don't have a dedicated sales team. As you grow and you get people who their job is just to run these things down, not a problem. But you kind of need to understand how budgets and approval processes work. What you're selling affects the approach. So if you're selling into IT operations, they tend to have large budgets, and they're always looking for ways to be more efficient. I have one IT ops guy, and he services 100 machines. And in 2 years' time, we want 1 head count for every 120 machines we have. So you need to understand what motivates each group that you're selling to. That kind of gets back to messaging. Sales funnel, I don't want to talk about this too much, but sales, actually, I'll talk about this just for a second. Sales is not, I think that's cool, here's a check. So as naive as it sounds, that's what I thought it was. Seriously, when I thought this, I had one of my first calls after I started this was, I met this guy and he's like, oh, this is awesome. Man, I would want to, and these 3 guys on my team, we should totally use this. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, great. So here's what it costs. How should we do this? And he's like, what? No, we've got to go ahead and get other people involved. I don't even have approval to go even look at new tools. Also back to the purchasing process. Some companies are like, for any software you buy, you have to get not only a quote from one vendor, you need to find 3 other vendors that also offer the same thing, get a quote, and we buy the lowest. Well, that doesn't really work when you're in a really new industry, right? Because we don't have necessarily somebody who does exactly what we do. We have some people who solve the problem in a different way that's actually not as good as what we do. But it can be very challenging. Basically, you gather sales prospects. This is what marketing is about. This is like pressing flesh, shaking hands, giving out business cards. You're getting your name out there, and you have people contact you. They're like, hey, what you do is interesting. Tell me more. And then you do what's called qualifying a lead, which is basically, hey, let's meet. Tell me what it is that you think we do. I will tell you what we actually do, and let's see if there's some common ground where we could actually help each other. Great example, a large federal government agency contacted us and said, hey, we've got a lot of static content online, a lot of people access us, and we'd really like to maybe try to make this faster. And it's like, well, given what they have and who uses it, how much traffic it is, we could help you, but it honestly wouldn't really help you that much. And you're the federal government, and so getting approval for this would probably take a long time, and you know what? It doesn't really make sense for us to keep talking. And it's like, you say that nicely, but that's kind of the conversation you have. And so that was a lead. It made sense, but they weren't really the right fit. And so that gets back to understanding the deal, understanding their needs, closing deals. Fulfillment is something a lot of people forget. In the software industry, it's great. You just give them software. But fulfillment is also like doing continual support. Basically, it's fulfilling the order, giving them what they asked for. This is really key. So starting it, I cannot tell you how much this has helped me. You know people who need what you're selling. You do. Every single person in this room knows somebody. Like if you have an idea for something, you know somebody who wants that. You absolutely do. So I did a lot of security. Perfect example. So I did security. So I knew a lot of guys at major corporations but they're on the security team or they're on the security ops team. They don't manage performance. But you know what? They know the guy who runs the dev shop, or they know the guy who's in charge of server configurations and the data center. I don't know them. I don't know somebody who directly knows them, but I know somebody who knows somebody. So LinkedIn, totally your friend. Basically, I went through when I was looking at early customers, and I said, I want somebody in Atlanta, so that way I can go on site, we can work with them, really build a good relationship. Wikipedia, incidentally, has an article entitled Businesses with Headquarters in Atlanta. And I went down the list and I applied my criteria of who's an ideal customer. So who's here? UPS is based here. Equifax is based here. Coca-Cola is based here. There's a lot. So I just basically built this giant list of everybody that would be a good fit. I then went on LinkedIn and I said, okay, who do I know that knows somebody at these companies? And then I went out to those people and I said, hey, can you give me an introduction? Another great thing is sales guys. I mean, I've always been a pretty friendly person, and so I know a bunch of the sales guys from the startup I was at and then at HP. And I went to them. They're like, yeah, Billy, we like you. I know 5 people inside of 5 different companies that absolutely need what you're talking about, and I will schedule a meeting for you, me, and that person to have lunch. These are your best ways of getting contacts because they're qualified. You have somebody who basically vouches for you that you are actually, somebody who actually can help them. And sales guys are ridiculous. You actually let them do the talking, even though they don't even know anything about your product. Like they are awesome. Like their answer is always, yeah, we can do that. Stuff like that. Sales guys are awesome. So, there's a fine line between sleazy and not sleazy. Luckily, I work with a lot of guys who are not sleazy, and they have been extremely helpful starting a business. So again, I've got maybe 2 slides left here. So tracking sales. You absolutely need to track this stuff. This comes back to cash flow and understanding, how much business do I have out there? You need to look at the pipeline and saying, here's how many prospects I have. Well, only 70% of those people are actually going to become leads. And only 30% of those people are going to get to the stage where I give them a quote and they don't laugh at me. And of those, maybe 15% of them, that's not like 15% of the people that came in. That's 15% of the people who actually made it through. I mean, this thing narrows really rapidly. You throw 100 companies in, you might get 1 or 2 out. So you definitely need to rigorously track this. So you want to keep track of who is interested. What do they want? What are their needs? What is that company? How close is it to my ideal company? Where am I in the process? Have I just done the initial feeling out call to see whether they're good or not? Or have we already gotten deep down into the bowels and they're calling in the guy who asked the check or who writes the check and he's the guy I need to impress? When did I last call for them? This is the other thing. I'm a fairly personal and sensitive guy, and I take it really personally when like people don't contact you back. And so I get really pissed off. Like companies would be like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm going to talk to so-and-so and I'll get back to you on Friday. Friday comes, they don't say anything. Next week, nothing. You send them an email on Thursday, nothing. Like a week and a half goes by. Finally, you get them on the phone, right? So you definitely need to keep track of when was the last time I talked to this person. And I actually set up Google reminders on Google Calendar to be like, here are the 3 people I need to call and poke. Be like, hey, are you alive? Type, you say it nicer than that, but it's kind of like, hey, I was so excited, about our call, and it seems like we're really moving together. Let me know who we should talk to next, blah, blah, blah. But you need to understand who your prospects are, because remember, basically a startup is like you're sitting on a burning building, and it's like, holy crap, how fast is water coming in? And will the flames consume me? And the flames is your runway and your burn rate. How much time do I have left before I have no money? And your water is coming from prospects. And so you need to know how big is this funnel and will I get consumed? And for a while there, you're going to be negative, right? We will only have just recently get to where we're breaking even. So what you have to do is look at this and say, okay, just am I going to die? Basically, do I have enough stuff coming in? There's software to help. I totally suggest getting Salesforce.com. Depending on the package that you cost, it can cost you a couple $100s a year. We probably spend about $500 a year. It's incredible. It'll keep track of all this stuff, like who are the people, when was the last time you contacted them, what was the outcome of that meeting. You actually can it integrates really nicely into Google Apps. So you can send emails from inside of Salesforce, and it will log it and everything. It's fantastic for taking care of this for you. All right, so that's basically it. And wow, I'm right at 8:30 despite starting a little late and a couple interruptions. Does anybody have any questions?
What was that part in the middle?
Buy me. Yeah.
How much runway do you have?
Right now?
Because you say you're about ready to break even, but if you weren't breaking even right now...
We've got money to get us through end of July. If no more business closed, I could pay my mortgage and my employees and my expenses through, I could not make the payment on August 1st. And again, that's one of the questions. At any point in time, you should know the answer to that. Because if somebody, so I actually do some security consulting to augment that. I just actually accepted a contract, and it's actually going to take a little bit of my time, but it was a very substantial amount of money that actually will, when that closes, extend that runway basically through into next year. But what I can do by knowing that runway is there's a big, O'Reilly does a big performance conference called Velocity. And I'm like, hey, I could buy a booth and sponsor that, and that's $12,000. Okay, well that knocks my runway back a little bit, but how many prospects will I get out of that? And so see, you're always doing this, kind of analysis of, does this get me closer to my goal of growing this? Yeah.
How do you deal with customers that you have serviced that like you, and over a year and a half time, they want to continue the relationship, but they don't want to feel like you're selling, them and invite you over to their kids' parties, family events, and
Wow, I've never had a customer invite me to their kids' events, but that would be kind of cool. I don't know, I'm not a great role model with my girly drink ways and my rampant cursing.
If you have if they have a daughter, great example.
Yeah, I guess. No, that's a good question.
Not pregnant and you drink the proper drinks.
That's true.
do a
Yeah.
job for them, and
So it depends on what you're selling them. So our product is billed per user per month, and people tend to buy a 1-year contract with us. And so we basically are going back every year and selling them more. And so it might be, hey, we sold you 3 licenses last year, but the thing is that they've given us a lot of feedback, and they're like, oh, wow, maybe IT operations is using this, but they're doing a major redesign of their website. And you know this because you talk to them fairly regularly because they're using your product, and you're always asking them for feedback or if they have bugs or problems. And so you kind of learn what's going on inside the company, and you can be like, hey, we could give you 3 more licenses and give you a 40% discount.
and they gave you some referrals.
And that's the other thing, is you want them to be referenceable customers. So right now, when you're having a prospect and they're like, I don't know, we're evaluating your solutions with somebody else, it's like, I've got 3 customers right now that have all agreed to be reference customers. You can call them right now. I won't even be on the phone, and you can ask them anything you want about us, and they've used us. And so yeah, you definitely want those good relationships with them.
And 20% is, they want more. Then you give them 20% off.
Yeah, here's the other thing. When you make the price tag, you can give them any type of discount you want, right? You could be like, I'm giving you a 70% discount. Well, yeah, that's because I just made the price this, so I could say I was giving you a 70% discount. That's the other great thing. When you don't have a lot of customers and there isn't kind of like an established price for your product and you're still kind of feeling it out, you can do that. And I mean, it is kind of gaming the system, but everybody knows you're doing it too. So, yeah.
For referenceable customers, is it a standard practice for them to ask what they're paying, or is that kind of
Normally not.
so usually they won't say what they're paying. They'll just give
Yep.
back information how the software works, but not.
Yeah, it's totally like, how do you guys use this software? Do you like it? What made you buy this over something else? Those are the types of questions they ask. It's kind of like what you ask somebody when you're checking like a job reference. It's the same thing. I've never heard of somebody asking a reference customer, how much are you guys paying for this? Yeah.
What about like cheap advertising?
We don't really do advertising. Most of our work is like going, speaking at conferences. We've done, well, when we've sponsored conferences, we've had like inserts in the bag and stuff like that, but I've never really looked at pay-per-click. I've started to look at Google AdWords, but honestly, we haven't really pushed that out too much yet, so I don't have any advice there. Sweet. Any other questions? Wow, okay, great. Yes?
So I've got a couple of things to talk more about if you want to. If you want to extend your time.
He might beat me, but what?
To like the pricing and sales.
Sure, yeah, you can ask.
There's certain thresholds in organizations where under this.
Oh, great point. So this gets back to the approval process. So when I was a manager at HP, I could approve up to $5,000. So if somebody wanted to go ahead and make a trip, I could be like, yes, approved. And if it was over that, I needed oversight. Now, that's what it was, the status quo. Then we hit a budget thing kind of early on inside of HP where I had to go to my immediate boss and say, I recommend we make this expense. It's, above $2,500, and I had to get his okay before I could go it. So understanding kind of, that's the approval process. So if you're selling, great example is Redgate. Redgate makes some awesome tools for developers to basically do like debugging and find memory traces and stuff like that. Their pricing is such that a frontline employee with like a P card, like a credit card, could right there not have to go to anybody higher and just be like, I bought a one user seat license for that. And if you're selling a utility that you're going to have a large number of people using it, you want to price it so that a frontline person does not have to ask anybody permission. They can just buy it. So yeah, great point. You definitely want to understand where those breaks are inside an organization. Typically, my experience has shown frontline manager can approve normally up to a couple $1,000s. Sometimes it's $2,000, but $5,000 seems to be about where that limit is.
3 was the one that I dealt with.
3 was the one you dealt with, so yeah. Yeah.
Between capital expense and operating expense.
All right, another good question. So we don't really deal with this too much because a lot of our systems, we do not make a capital investment in them. Instead, we do renting through cloud providers. But capital expenses are things like servers, hardware, things that you make an investment in, and then they depreciate over time. And they have value, and you can sell them, and you start getting into how you do accounting practices, whether what you can write off in terms of expenses and things like this. And honestly, I don't have a great answer for this. Oh, I talked about accountants, and there wasn't a slide on here. Buy TurboTax. When you have a corporation or you're incorporated, you have to do taxes quarterly. Well, it depends on whether you're an LLC or S Corp or a C Corp, but you have to do taxes. TurboTax Small Business actually will do any of them for you. When I actually had to do taxes for myself, Zumpf had to issue Billy Hoffman a W-2. How do you do that? Shit, I don't know. TurboTax is like, issue your employees a W-2, and I'm like, awesome. So again, seriously, it was like $60. It was like $60 to buy it. So yes, buy that. I actually did my taxes this year with TurboTax. I actually have an accountant that my family and friends of my family have used literally for days. It's great. I was in their office once, and my mom was there actually too, and she's like, "Oh, Doug, I remember when you fell off your bike in our front yard, and this guy's like, great at the temples and whatever, and my mom's totally embarrassing him." So yeah, we have an accountant, and I will probably use him next year, and it probably won't cost me $60 a year to do it. $60 plus my time. It'll probably cost me a couple $100. But if if you are so sophisticated that you need things like capital expenses and depreciation and stuff like that, that you need to bring in an accountant, bring in the accountant. The fact that you need to bring in an accountant, that's a good problem to have, because it means you're successful enough to have that many problems that you need to bring him in. So just pay it. That's another thing, like, don't do it. You'll pull your own hair out.
So I was also thinking about the sales side. You may not have dealt with this here, but when you're selling, there's a different budget for capital expense and operating expense. And so if you can get it into one or the other, where maybe they don't have money in one, but they can spend whatever they want in the other.
Yes. So we actually just did this with a client where they had no money for software, but they did have money for services, consultants. And so we wrote this contract as we are going to come in as consultants to do X, Y, and Z, and we will be using these tools. And as part of our services contract, we will make these tools available to you. We're a software company that sells you the tools, but so you just were the contract to help them. And I mean, that's again to try to help them get around their own internal bullshit. Having worked at a small or large company, I can tell you there's bullshit that you would not even think should be there, but it is there. And what's funny is that they put all these rules in place to like enforce stuff, but everybody there immediately learns how to hack around these rules. So nobody actually follows any of the rules, but the rules are there and cause problems for you. It's really asinine, but exactly. It doesn't. It gets complex. But that's a good point. So if you're selling software, that all gets back to where your budget comes from. How often is that budget allocated? And so if you guys have ever worked in consulting or security consultants especially, get tons of business at the end of a company's fiscal year. Because the company's like, shit, we allocated, $100,000 this year for security or consulting services, and the fiscal year ends in 6 weeks, and we either spend this money or lose this money. And so suddenly they're like, holy crap! And so that's why you see people like ordering external pen tests on like December 15th, and you're like, oh, come on, seriously? You're like, thanks for the money, but seriously? And it's because they were about to lose it. And so as a sales side, you can kind of use that to your advantage, because if you're trading a company that's publicly traded, you know when their fiscal year is. It's public knowledge. So you have a really good idea of when their budget is getting allocated, when their budget is about to be gone, and so that can kind of help guide who you should be talking to when. Okay, I'm really tired, seriously. Any others? Ben, or Bo is not allowed to talk. All right, sweet. Thank you, guys. Thank you.